welcome to this week's episode of Sustainable Sedition Radio. Dispatch 007 and our final dispatch. How homesteading changed my life. And yeah, you heard me right. This is going to be the final dispatch. But it's also just the beginning of something brand new. And I'll explain everything in depth at the end of the episode and tell you all about what you can expect from us going forward, so stick around. But before we get there, I want to take you on one last deep dive. Today, I'm going to tell you my story. The journey from how I got started to where I'm at now. The two most impactful tools that I've used to get clear on where I'm going, and the real reason that I'm doing all of this in the first place. So settle in, because, man, this one's going to go deeper than any dispatch before it. All right, let's kick this off with some food for thought. So let's get one thing straight right off the bat. Homesteading is not some retirement fantasy for boomers who want to go play pioneer with a fat pension and a Kubota, all right? It's not a Little House on the Prairie, and it sure as hell isn't about going back in time and living like it's 1850. It's about taking back control of your life. It's about independence. It's about stacking the odds back in your favor and making sure that you're equipped to handle a world where change is the only constant. Up until the 70s or 80s, this wasn't like some niche lifestyle. This was just what everybody did. To them, it wasn't homesteading, it was just life. It was common sense. And it wasn't that long ago. Your grandma did this. Your great-grandparents damn sure did. And they didn't do it because they were preppers or rebels. They did it because the grocery store just wasn't always a guarantee. Like, of course you had at least a small kitchen garden. Of course you had some method of preserving what you grew. And of course you had some chickens for eggs if it, made sense and you had the space. And that's how a lot of people in that generation ended up making through the Great Depression. They didn't do it for likes. They did it for survival. Now it's the same deal today. It's not about some curated lifestyle aesthetic. It's about relearning the basic skills that we've lost in an age where everything's on demand. And we don't have to produce a damn thing for ourselves anymore. Now, if you've tuned in over the last few weeks, you've seen us take a hammer to politics, to centralized control systems, and the fake solutions that they keep selling. The ones that always end up giving them more control over your life, but nothing ever actually seems to get any better. Yeah, those fake solutions. And look, I set it up this way on purpose, because we've got to know what we're walking away from before we can start building something better. So we've laid the foundation, the mindset, the ethos, the why behind all this. You know what this movement stands for, what we're all about here. Now, let's build on it. And the framing, the brick, the structure of building a life that can't be blown over in a storm is homesteading. Now, before you tap out thinking, yeah, but I rent an apartment, or I've got no land, no time, and I've got no idea where to start, let me stop you right there. It's not about owning or having access to acreage. It's about a mindset. It's about looking out at the scattered pieces of your life and linking them together into systems that feed you, heal you, and free you. So when I say homesteading, I'm not talking about, 40 acres and a mule. I'm talking about shit that you can do right now with what you've got right in front of you. I'm talking about, sprouting greens on a shelf in your apartment. I'm talking about canning dried beans that you got on sale at Costco. Swapping some mead that you made for fresh eggs from your neighbor. Turning kitchen scraps into compost or feed for your chickens. Learning how to cook like your grandma. Stacking a backup water supply in the closet. I'm talking producing, bartering, building, fixing, foraging, and fermenting. And trust me, it's doable. Even if you've got only $25 in the bank and 2 kids screaming in the other room. And I know that it's doable. I know it. Because that's literally me. And I'm doing it. I remember the first time that I ever ate something I grew myself. It was right after COVID. And that was fun, right? We all went through it. And I'm not going to get into all the politics or the questionable or maybe just blatantly false mainstream media narratives right now. We've all got our thoughts on what really went down. But one thing that I do know for sure is that most of us walked into a grocery store at some point during that whole charade and said, "Holy shit, there's no eggs. There's no goddamn toilet paper." All these supply chains we never questioned just snapped. 1 minute it's business as usual, and the next, you're staring at empty shelves and wondering how long you've got before everyone else starts freaking out. And I'll be real with you. For me in that moment, it was total panic. That feeling of, shit, I am not ready for this yet. By that point in my life, I was already of the mind that the system was completely unsalvageable, and I'd been talking about homesteading and permaculture, mainly as a way that we could make it through the total collapse of civilization. That's where I was at mentally at that point. And, I had every intention of going that route one day with those two things, but in my head, that was all still a ways down the road. I always figured the collapse would come eventually, and I had this idea that everything would go, full Mad Max before we could rebuild. But I just was not ready for that first domino to fall. And when it seemed like that's exactly what was happening with COVID, man, it just hit me like a goddamn 2x4 fell on my head, That whole experience was a massive wake-up call for a lot of people, and it certainly was for myself. I had just become a dad at the time. My daughter wasn't even a year old. I was brand new to fatherhood, and I was greener than grass. I didn't have any goddamn idea what I was doing. But I knew above all else that I had to protect my kid. And suddenly I was in, what seemed like this terrifying position. I thought that the shit had actually hit the fan and that everything was about to unravel. And I was looking around like, I've got no backup plan. I've got no food security. I've got no clue how to provide if this thing really goes tits up. So I just did the only thing that I knew how to do in that moment, and I got my ass to work. Back then, I was renting this little 2-bedroom apartment in the city, right? There was this little 15-foot by 5-foot side alley that was mostly concrete. But right next to the fence, there was a little strip of neglected, dry-ass dirt. It was just full of pea gravel and weed cloth that had been sitting there for years. And I just thought, screw it, I'm gonna dig it up and just see what I can grow. It was a totally desperate move, if I'm really being honest, but I didn't know what else to do. It felt like a race against the clock watching those first sprouts come up, Like maybe if I could just get something growing, I'd have a shot at staying one step ahead of whatever came next. At the time, it also felt like kind of like a personal rebellion. Like a middle finger to the people who were using the chaos of COVID as a chance to grab even more control. So I planted some tomatoes. I planted some lettuce, a little squash, a few potatoes, some chives, a couple onions, nothing fancy, nothing impressive, just the basics. But when we harvested that first batch, and when I took that first bite of something that I grew with my own two hands, in a world that felt like it was just falling apart all around me, it changed me. It gave me this sense of security that I hadn't felt in months. Not because I suddenly had a full pantry, and I stopped needing to go to the grocery store because I didn't. But because in the middle of that whole shitstorm, I knew that I could do something. No matter how small that it was a win. I was doing a lot of mushroom foraging too at the time. And I lived on the coast, so I was able to go out on the pier and bring home rock crabs, mussels, and seaweed, and I could produce. I could forage, I could fish, I could fucking adapt. And I had a blast doing it. And it fed my family. I wasn't just completely dependent anymore. I was becoming capable. I could pivot. And when COVID turned out not to be the end of the world, I was like, I am never going to be that unprepared for something like that ever again. And I've carried that mindset with me ever since. Looking back now, the only regret I have is waiting until the chips were down to actually start doing what I already knew that I wanted to do. So now, I'm asking you to learn from my mistakes. Take that first step. Don't wait until things get any worse. Because that one small step, man, it changed the entire direction of my life. This dispatch is for the everyday folks, in the same spot that I was in not all that long ago. The young, broke parents trying to just make it work. The people still stuck in the system, but quietly planning their exit. It's for the mom with no time. It's for the dad who never learned this stuff. And for the 20-something who just realized that nobody's coming to save you. It ain't glorious. It's not a brand. It's not a trend. But it is gaining more and more traction because it's actually helping real people carve out a path of this miserable gray hellscape that is modern life. It's helped me. And I want to take what I've learned and help you too. Now look, I'm not the guy who's going to change your life. You are. I'm not some internet guru. I'm not some dude with a messiah complex pretending like I've got all the answers. And if you just buy my, 10-step program, boom, suddenly you're going to be living your dream life or whatever. I'm not selling you anything. I'm not charging you for this. And I'm sure as hell not handing you a color-by-numbers guide and saying, do these 5 things and you're going to be a bona fide homesteader and everything's going to be fine. That's not what this is. I'm not the guy who knows everything. I'm still building. And I haven't even made it to where I want to end up yet. I'm still going. I'm not here to tell you what to think. I'm here to help you see how to think differently. How to spot the holes in your life before the bottom falls out from underneath you. To look at your setup, your values, your reality, and start making it stronger, a step at a time. Homesteading isn't some checklist that you copy off a YouTube video or anyone's podcast. It's a way of life. And yeah, it's going to look different for a guy living in New York City in an apartment than it does for me out here in the hills. But the principles stay the same. Here's what I mean. For me, it all started in about 2018, in the middle of LA. I was broke as hell, and I mean flat out, barely scraping by, broke. I was walking the sidewalks in a city where everything's imported, sterilized, and wrapped in plastic, and I found these gnarly-looking bitter weeds growing out of the crack in the sidewalk, right? I'd seen them in some foraging book or some Instagram post once, I don't remember. And anyway, I looked them up, I cross-checked a few details, and sure enough, that was opium lettuce and wild rocket. I picked a bunch, tossed them into a salad with some limp grocery store greens or whatever, and I ate it like I felt like I just pulled off a goddamn bank heist. It wasn't even that good. It was bitter as hell, but it felt like this little revolution. And, I know it might just sound ridiculous, but that moment was an incredibly profound turning point for me. It was the first time I'd ever eaten something that I harvested myself and identified. It wasn't something that I bought. It wasn't something that I paid the system to provide for me. It was something that I found. Something I foraged, and in the most unlikely of places. And that whole thing, it just lit this fire in me. It opened my eyes to what's really out there. So a year or so later, I was living in Alabama, and I just saw this big-ass, bright red shelf mushroom growing off a stump. And I saw this thing while walking through the woods, and I was like, wait a minute. I think I know what that is. And sure enough, it was a reishi mushroom. And I had been buying the stuff in the form of overpriced supplements for years, thinking that it came from some, sacred mountain in the Himalayas or something. And here it was, just growing out of a rotten log 10 minutes from my house. Not after that, I found my first flush of oyster mushrooms. Same deal. I looked it up, triple checked, brought them home, and I made the most amazing stir fry that I had ever tasted in my life. And it's like, it was amazing because of the story behind the food that I put into it. It was a whole experience from going out there, finding them, bringing them home, not sure if I'm going to fucking poison myself or not, and then double checking that I had identified them correctly, throwing in a pot, and dude, it was just, it's going to like make me emotional, So anyway, it just blew my mind. Not because it was that delicious, but because I was starting to realize just how much food was already out there, just hiding in plain sight, if you only knew how to see it. And I already loved spending time out in the woods, but when I realized that I could do that and then come home with a buttload of food that cost me nothing other than what I, was doing already that I loved, man, that's it. I was gone. I was hooked. I started learning how to ID plants and fungi left and right, everything. I started figuring out the seasonal rhythms, what pops up when to watch for, or what to watch for after it rains. And before long, I was picking miner's lettuce, stinging nettles, chickweed, clover, plantain, dandelion, yarrow, lamb's quarters, all the basics. All kinds of mushrooms. It was just a blast. And I was even having fun with it and just bringing home like random shit like bamboo shoots that I found out you could eat from, stuff I would dig up on landscaping jobs. And, I would pickle them and I would use them as a topper for ramen noodles that I'd make from scratch. And they were really good. Anyway, then a couple years after that, I moved up to the Northern California coast. And, man, everything took off. Foraging went from just like a curiosity of mine to a whole full-on lifestyle. Now, California's politics aside, this place up north is just a forager's paradise. The mushroom scene here is just absolutely wild. We've got chanterelles, porcini, turkey tail, lion's mane, everything that you can literally think of. There's something for every season. It felt like the biggest level up of my life at the time. And the coast, man. I started fishing just to see if I could bring something home. And one day, I got this monster tug on the line. And I'm thinking, what the hell is this? I either just hooked a log, or I had the freaking shark from Jaws on the other end of my line. But when I reeled it in, to my surprise and amusement, it was a crab pot. One of those classic hoop net style traps, And I had no idea what the hell I was looking at. It looked like, to me at the time, some kind of busted basketball hoop wrapped in kelp and barnacles and rope. But, I brought it up and I untangled the mess. I was checking it out, and sure enough, it had a little bait cage inside. So I took it home, I looked it up, and I fell headfirst down the rabbit hole of crabbing. And I had no gear other than that, ocean gift of a crab pot and no experience whatsoever. But I came back the next day with a $7 pack of, nasty ass Tyson chicken legs, tied one into the cage, dropped it off the pier, and I waited. I was out there with my daughter. She was maybe like a year and a half old at the time. And when we pulled up that pot for the first time, man, I swear to God, it was just crawling with crabs. I mean, 20, maybe 30 of them just like scuttling all over each other. And most of them were way too small to keep, we had maybe like 3 or 4 legal ones in that mix. And I will never forget the look on my daughter's face. She's squealing and pointing and chasing them all over the dock while they scurried all over the place. And it was just pure joy. And I mean, dude, I was fucking stoked. I was standing there thinking, we just pulled a gourmet $150 crab dinner out of the ocean for the price of some factory farm chicken. It was glorious. It felt like I had just cracked the code, Like, it's possible to learn this stuff and feed your family with it. Even if you didn't grow up with it. Even if you've got no money, no land, and no fucking clue what you're doing. It was primal. It was empowering. And man, it was just the beginning. From there, I went full sea forager. I learned the tides, I learned the rules, I learned how to harvest without, screwing up the ecosystem, and I started diving into mussels, limpets, sea snails, oysters, and urchins. And I got to the point where I'd come home with just totes full of wild food from the ocean and the forest. We're talking, surf perch, crabs, seaweed, shellfish, and porcini mushrooms that were sometimes, I'm not even exaggerating, like the size of my goddamn head. 5-star ingredients, just that I scraped off the rocks and I pulled out of the woods. All while living in an urban apartment, and half the world was still fighting over toilet paper and frozen pizzas. There were a couple times I remember clearly during that period where the fridge was just basically empty, except for a bowl full of mussels and crabs that I'd just pulled from the sea and some mushrooms that I'd foraged the day before. And you know what? We ate like freaking kings. It wasn't like a survival meal. It was a goddamn gourmet feast. And that was the season where it all started to click. Not just foraging, not just filling gaps with a couple wild ingredients here and there, but building a way of life that actually fed us. And then, shortly after that, the systems really started stacking when I started looking at my home as something that could produce for me, instead of just this place that I threw money at and slept there. We moved into a bigger rental with a real yard, and I got my first chickens. Started pulling warm eggs from the nest boxes every morning, cooking breakfast with foods that my own birds laid. And man, it just tasted like freedom. And I don't give a shit how cliche that sounds. I would eat every meal like it was an act of open rebellion. It was awesome. A couple years later, I met the love of my life. And we moved into this tiny spot with just enough space to start experimenting. And we ran meat rabbits in the backyard, had a little compost pit, some hutches tucked against the fence, some potted plants, and a couple chickens roaming the yard, scratching through the rabbit bedding for, bugs and scraps and whatever. It wasn't anything mind-blowing, but it worked. We had a closed-loop fertility cycle happening in a tiny rental yard. And I mean tiny. Like, this thing was maybe like 30 feet long by 9 or 10 feet wide, tops. Everything fed something else. Our waste became a resource. Rabbit shit became compost. It was a system, and it started to make sense. Eventually, we moved into a bigger place together, and we kept that same system. We just had more space, so we scaled it up a little bit. Got some more birds, got some more rabbits, got some more plants, and this time we added some Muscovy ducks into the mix. These quiet, if you don't know what they are, they're these quiet, weird, like straight up little velociraptors that lay fantastic eggs and just hunt slugs like they're paid hourly to do it. But at the same time, that's when the reality kind of dawned on us too. Because I'll tell you, taking the life of that first rabbit was different. Crabbing is one thing. Mussels don't squeal. But harvesting an animal that you raised, now that hits different. And man, it wasn't easy, and it shouldn't be. If you don't feel anything while you're taking the life of a cute little bunny, something's fucking wrong with you. It was never pleasant, but it grounded us. It gave us reverence. It put us face to face with what it really means to eat. No hiding it inside a neat little cellophane-wrapped box on a shelf. Just gratitude, consequence, and the circle of life that we're all a part of, whether we admit it or not. And then we had our son Bjorn. And man, this freaking guy, I don't even have the words. Watching the woman that you love fall head over heels with this little wild man that you created together. And from day one, he just had this sheer will, And he just wrecked both of us in the absolute best way. Everything got more intense, more beautiful, and more, urgent. It flipped a switch in both of us. just this drive to be more. And like any parent will tell you, it's beautiful, but it's also brutally challenging at times. Suddenly, there was a lot more weight on both of our shoulders, more pressure on our relationship, more clarity in our purpose and our vision. The stakes were a lot higher now. What kind of man do I need to be in order to lead my son by example? How can she balance being a mother and still be a whole human being? It wasn't just about wanting a better life anymore. Now it was about how the hell are we actually going to build one that can carry what we're trying to create for our kids? And that's when we found out that she was pregnant again. Bjorn was only 6 months old. We were still adjusting to life as parents of two at that point, barely catching our breath, and suddenly it was like, boom, round 3. And don't get me wrong, it was a gift. It's always a gift. But it also hit both of us like a freight train. It was really unexpected. Our first son, we definitely, planned a little bit more, but this one was like way out of left field. And I mean, especially for her. I mean, she had just started feeling herself again after, 6 months being postpartum. Now, one baby will rock your whole world, but two under 2 years old, now, that's a whole different kind of chaos. Beautiful chaos, but chaos nonetheless. That was a moment when everything we talked about, that we wanted to do someday, had to become real. We needed more space. We needed breathing room. We needed systems that actually produced, not just were fun or sounded good on paper. Because with 3 kids, 2 of them still in diapers, man, we don't have the time to waste on setups that don't pull their weight and actually help. And as grateful as we were, to have a landlord who was cool with us raising ducks and chickens and rabbits in the backyard, there's only so far that you can realistically go in a rental. And I know that. I wasn't about to ask him to, build a goddamn food forest in the backyard. We weren't going to raise goats or run aquaponics through the yard. There's a point where it's just unreasonable to ask. We were outgrowing the setup, and really freaking fast. So, when the offer came in to rent the solar-powered, spring-fed, off-grid cabin on her dad's property, it felt like one of those moments where the universe tosses you a blessing wrapped inside a challenge. And I'll be honest, at first, man, I didn't want to take it. I thought that it was going to make running my handyman service just damn near impossible. I thought it would make co-parenting with my daughter's mom, who still lives in town, that much more complicated. I was afraid of the snow, the commute, the terrain, the logistics. All of it just felt like too much. But after taking some time and sitting with it, I just kind of had to face it. It's like, am I actually going to live this life or not? Am I going to let fear of discomfort stop me from taking the next step towards where I really want to be? Or am I going to take this shot that I've got to give my kids the kind of childhood that I wish that I had? Out in the mountains, catching frogs, raising animals, skinning deer, chopping wood, learning real skills, learning real work, and real freedom. And fuck yeah, it's hard. But so is anything that's actually worth doing. So we took the leap. Leap of faith. Total leap of faith. We packed up all the animals, all my tools, the kids, everything we owned that wasn't nailed down, and we moved up the mountain. Not to escape, but to build. And it's not some peaceful retreat from society. It's a proving ground. It really, truly strips away all of your excuses and forces you to just figure shit out fast. It's real life out here. It's getting snowed in for 2 weeks and hoping that you prepped enough and that you stored enough food. It's going out and fixing a busted water line at midnight. It's being your own plumber, your own power company, your own trash service, and your own fire department. It's chasing, fucking bears out of the goddamn trash for the third time this week. It's carrying firewood back into the snow with a screaming toddler in one arm. We're still renting. I'm still commuting to work 5 days a week. The gas alone is expensive. And the roads just absolutely beat the shit out of all the vehicles. And the maintenance isn't cheap either. The overall cost of living is technically lower, but the workload is much higher. But still, we've got land beneath our feet. We've got spring water on tap, solar in the walls, and for the first time ever, enough space to build the systems we've been dreaming of for years. And little by little, it's all starting to click. All the years of trial and error, the wild foraging, the compost experiments, the chickens, the ducks, the busted knuckles, the late night garden planning, the what the hell are we doing moments, it's all slowly coming together for us here. We're about 6 months deep into this new chapter, and it's wild, it's rugged, and it's frankly demanding as hell. But every time I walk outside and I see my daughter out in the garden harvesting calendula, or my son pointing at beetles with the ducks trailing behind him, I sit back and I'm like, yeah, this is it. Every egg that we collect, every herb drying on the shelf, every pound of meat in the freezer, and every ingredient that didn't come from a store is a piece of this life that we're building, of this system that we're building. It's not something that we're escaping to. It's not something that we're performing for anyone. It's just something that we're doing every day, every season, and with every little win that stacks up over time. And look, I'm not telling you my story because I'm over here like, yay, I made it, because I haven't. This is just another step into a new level for me. It's the next chapter. And guess what? There's always another level after that. I'm telling you this because I want you to know that I didn't start here. And this isn't the end of the story either. But if the story didn't start with me eating weeds off of LA sidewalks, then I can almost guarantee you that I wouldn't have the experience or the mindset to recognize an opportunity like this when it came along. Or maybe I would, I don't know. I'm not fucking Doctor Strange flipping through alternate timelines. I'm just a guy who took that first step. And you can take that step too, from wherever you are right now. You don't need to go off-grid. You don't need chickens or a food forest tomorrow. Or hell, at all. Maybe you hate chickens. Maybe you're allergic to food forests or something. I don't know. But I do know that you can do something. I want you to understand this. The second that you find just one way to start participating in your own food production, you start breaking your dependence on people and systems that don't give a damn about your well-being. Start with herbs on your windowsill. Start with sprouting microgreens. Start with a jar of fermented garlic honey on your counter. Start with one foraged plant. One batch of home canned broth. One wild fish that you pull out of somewhere with a rusty pole. I don't care where you start. Just start. When you commit to producing even just a little bit of your own food, I promise you, it will change the way that you see the entire damn world. All right. Now, let's bring it all the way back to the beginning, to the plant that started it all for me. Our plant of the week for this final dispatch, Lactica virosa, better known as opium lettuce. Now, Opium lettuce wasn't technically the first wild thing that I ever ate. I mean, I picked blackberries with my mom as a kid. I would stuff my face with cactus pears when I lived in Arizona. And there's probably other stuff too, buried in, childhood memories or whatever. But opium lettuce, that was different. That was the first time I identified and harvested something that wasn't, obvious. It wasn't a fruit from a bush or a berry from someone's garden. It was this jagged, mean-looking weed pushing out of a sidewalk crack in the middle of the goddamn city. I'd like I said, I had seen it in some guide or a post online, and the name stuck. I was like, opium? What the hell kind of lettuce is this? So I got curious, and I gave it a shot. And that moment, that act of seeing something wild, identifying it, harvesting it, and then eating it, it switched on a little light bulb in my head. It felt like a goddamn glitch in the Matrix at the time. I didn't think food or medicine could be grown up through the concrete in a place like Los Angeles. It turns out, this plant has a long history in European folk medicine. Not because it gets you high, it doesn't, but because of the milky white sap that leaks when you snap the stem. That sap is loaded with compounds like lactocin, which have legit sedative, pain-relieving, and cough-suppressing properties. Old school herbalists used it to calm nerves, ease sleep, quiet a cough, or take the edge off of physical pain. It was like nature's Tylenol before Tylenol was ever a thing. And the plant itself is rugged. In its prime, it can grow up to 6 feet tall, but early on, it hugs the ground like a pissed-off-looking dandelion. The leaves are long, jagged, deeply lobed. Think like lettuce meets thistle. They're bitter as hell raw, but you can saute them or mix them with, milder greens to mellow it all out. Let's see. The stem's hollow. It usually has a purple tinge to it, and it's covered in these little tiny spikes. They can't actually stab you. They're, made out of just, the same material that the stem is made out of. You're not going to get stabbed picking it. The sap is this white, sticky, strong substance. It tastes really strong. When the plant bolts, you'll see these little yellow flowers that look similar to dandelions. You'll find this thing growing in all the forgotten places, roadsides, sidewalks, alleyways, vacant lots, anywhere that's neglected. As for prep, the dried leaves make a calming tea, especially if you blend it with, a lemon balm or a chamomile. If you want to spend all the time to do it, which I never have, but I found this out, you can actually squeeze out a bunch of the sap, dry it out, and make a tincture for cough suppression and sleep aid. And it's old school right there. Too much of this stuff can make you feel dizzy and nauseous, so go slow, respect the plant, as with any other plant medicine. But honestly, none of that was why I picked this thing. I didn't know any of this shit back then. I picked it because I wanted to learn. I was broke. I was lost. And I was looking for something else. Yeah, it's bitter. But so is medicine. So is waking up. That sidewalk salad changed my whole trajectory during a rough patch in my life. And to this day, when I spot a cluster of opium lettuce pushing up through a cracked curb or a forgotten back lot, I give it a little nod, because that plant was my gateway to self-reliance. All right. Now, as is tradition, let's crack into our tactic for tough times, or good ones. Now, earlier, I told you that my intention here is to teach you guys how to think, not what to think. So hear me out. What I'm talking about today is not something that you need, some master's degree in business to understand. This is one foundational skill that's either going to make or break whether you can actually build a life worth living or spend the rest of your life putting out fires that could have easily been prevented. Unless you get really lucky and you sail through life with no problems, which, maybe you're just that guy. I don't know. This week, I'm going to be teaching you how to think in systems. We're talking about your homestead, your health, your money, your family, your work, your sanity, all of it. We've all been trained to think in linear steps, right? A leads to B, B leads to C, done. But in reality, life's just not that simple. Your garden's not a straight line. Your finances aren't a straight line. And raising a kid sure as hell is not a straight line. Life is a web. It's one giant, messy, beautiful web made up of a damn near infinite number of systems stacked on top of one another. Every piece affects every other piece. You fix one thing, and 3 new problems pop up unless you understand how those pieces connect. And until you see that, you'll spend the rest of your life stuck in reactive mode, patching holes and wondering why nothing works. So, let's break it down in a way that actually clicks. Let's start with the system that you know best, your body. Now, when you eat, that's your input. The food goes into your mouth, you chew it up, and you swallow. It drops into your stomach, gets doused in acid, and gets broken down even further. Then it moves into your small intestine, where all those nutrients get absorbed with the help of gut bacteria. Then, it heads to the large intestine to reabsorb water and finish off the job. Finally, your body pulls out the energy and the raw materials that it needs to repair cells, fuel your brain, keep you moving, and keep you alive. That's your output. Health, energy, strength, vitality, or disease, fatigue, and breakdown if your system's jacked up. If one piece is off, so let's say you eat garbage or you nuke your gut bugs with antibiotics or too much alcohol, the whole system suffers. You don't digest properly. You don't absorb nutrients. Your energy tanks, your mood tanks, your sleep sucks, and your immune system gets hammered. It's not one problem. It's a cascade. Because every piece is connected. All right, you get it? So now zoom out. Your garden. You input seed and compost. Water, sunlight, soil microbes, and your care, that's the process. And your output is either food or a failed attempt in a lesson. Your finances, your income is your input. Your process is how you budget, spend, invest, and save. Your output is either more freedom or more debt and more stress, depending on how your system processes those inputs. Same thing with your relationship. You input presence, communication, and love. You build trust, share hard truths, stack good memories in that process. And the output is either a bond that holds up when shit goes sideways, or resentment and sleeping on the couch wondering what the hell went wrong. See the pattern? Every area of life is a system. Once you understand the flow, you can stop chasing symptoms like a dog chasing cars and go find and fix the core issue. So here's the ultimate formula that you can use to do just that. Let's strip it down and make it dead simple. Step 1, you see the system. Start training your mind to see systems. Not just random events, not just isolated problems. Don't say, I'm always broke. Say, what's my money system look like? Don't say, my health sucks. Say, where's my health system falling apart? Step 2, you're going to map out the flow. What are the inputs that are coming in? What happens to them in the process? What outputs come out on the other side? See, I'm a visual learner, so I always got to write it down or draw it out. So get it out of your head and onto paper so that your brain can stop chasing its own tail. Step 3, you got to find the bottleneck. A system is only strong as its weakest link. So where's it breaking down? What's the core issue? Are you eating like shit? Is your soil too alkaline? Are you drowning in debt? Are you showing up properly in your relationship? Find that choke point, the one piece that's screwing up the entire flow. Step 4, now you redesign that system. You don't just patch. You can't cure a disease by masking the symptoms. No more Band-Aid antidepressants on an unhealthy lifestyle. No more shotgunning fertilizer at your dead soil while you're ignoring soil biology. No more stacking credit card debt and then blaming the system. No more pointing the finger at your partner when the foundation's cracked. Find the core structural weakness and redesign the system to prevent the problem from happening in the first place. Create a daily movement routine, fix your gut health, and eat real food. Start building your soil life instead of dumping more chemicals. Build a budget that supports your actual priorities. Make space in your day to nurture your relationship. Step 5, you iterate and adjust. No system is perfect forever. You have to always check it. You adjust and adapt. You keep it fluid, not rigid. Your life is a living, breathing organism. Your systems need tending like a garden. Seasons change. Life changes, guys. There's no one-time fix for anything. There's only tending, pruning, and refining your process. The biggest shift happens when you stop thinking in isolated problems and you start thinking in connected flows. This is what I've been talking about this whole time throughout all 7 of these dispatches whenever I've mentioned systems over and over and over again. So stop slapping duct tape on problems. Start designing to prevent them from happening. So let's do a quick recap on the formula, right? See, map, find, design, iterate. See the system, map the flow, find the bottleneck, design a better system, iterate, and improve. That's it. You master this, you master your life. So here's the deal. When you really start to see systems, you realize 2 massive truths. That number 1, systems aren't broken. They're doing exactly what they're designed to do. People say, the healthcare system is broken. No, it's not. It's working perfectly to perpetuate illness that generates profit, keep you dependent, and funnel power upwards to the top. People say that the education system's broken. No, it's not. It's working exactly as designed to create obedient workers and consumers who don't ask questions, not independent thinkers. People say, the political system's broken. No, it's not. It's designed to consolidate power, to keep the game going, and to maintain your dependence on rulers instead of local voluntary solutions. The second point that you realize when you start seeing systems and understanding how they work is that politicians and their, quote unquote, new solutions are just new patches, new band-aids on the same rotten foundation. It's like whack-a-mole. You guys remember that game? You smack one mole, they solve one problem, and 5 more pop up. And then, so they solve one problem, that creates 5 more problems, they demand more control, and then that whole fucking thing repeats indefinitely. That's the system, guys. This is by design. Every new crisis justifies tightening the leash. And if we all cheer for it like a bunch of mindless idiots, then, here we are. And I don't mean to insult anyone. Most people aren't stupid. We've just been trained not to think this way by design. But when you think in systems, you start seeing through the whole thing. You realize that the system isn't going to save you. The system needs you to stay sick, broke, scared, and obedient. And your best move is to build your own systems for food, for health, for community, for income. So you don't have to rely on theirs. They don't want you thinking like this. That's why they don't teach us this shit in school. Because if everybody understood systems thinking, nobody would fall for the vote hard or trust the experts. People would build strong families, resilient homesteads, and local trade networks. And the big centralized machine would lose that much of its power and its footing. So the ultimate act of sedition is learning to see systems everywhere. It's fixing your own and refusing to be just another input into their system. Now, in order to see systems, you've got to be able to recognize patterns. And if you're looking for patterns, you've got to learn how to slow the hell down and really observe. That's why this week's practical skill highlight is observation and pattern recognition. Look, you can have all the tools, all the money, and all the knowledge in the world. But if you can't see what's right in front of your face, none of that does you any good. This skill either makes or breaks the success of the systems that you design and your ability to identify and solve problems. Most people can't observe because they're just moving too goddamn fast. We're like horses racing with blinders on. Our eyes are open, but we don't see. Our ears work fine, but we don't hear shit. Modern life does that to us. It shoves us into this dopamine slot machine, of scroll, stress, numb, repeat. We miss the tracks in the mud, the shift in the wind, the subtle changes in body language, the micro hesitation before a politician lies. Observation isn't just looking. It's really seeing. It's tuning into all your senses and really feeling, smelling, tasting, truly listening. It's about conscious awareness to gain deeper understanding. And sometimes in order to do that, you just got to shut up and listen. Get out of your head. Stop assuming shit. When you walk your land, don't just look at the plants. Feel where the water moves. Smell where the fungus lives. Listen to where the birds gather. When you talk with your partner, don't just wait for your turn to speak. Listen for the deeper message behind what they're saying. Same deal with your body. Pay attention to how your diet and your lifestyle affect your mood and your energy levels. When you watch the news, don't get hypnotized by the headlines. Pay attention to who benefits. Follow the money. Watch the incentives. When you truly observe, you see the stories going on behind the surface. That's when patterns reveal themselves. And patterns are everything. A pattern isn't just a repeated shape on a quilt or a tile floor. It's a reliable relationship between events. It's the shape of how things move and behave over time. It's a story on repeat. In nature, patterns are everywhere. Spirals in sunflowers and hurricanes. Branches in rivers and trees. Waves on the shore. The way that a fox circles around before lying down. The tide doesn't just go out. It follows lunar and solar cycles. The birds don't just come back in spring. They follow environmental cues. You see patterns in your body when you always get sick after pushing yourself way too hard. You see them in your mind when you get stuck in the same negative thought loops when something you like doesn't happen, or something that you don't like happens. You see them when you keep recreating the same relationship dynamics over and over. You see them in every economic boom and bust cycle. You see them played out socially with divide and conquer tactics. You see it in politics when every single crisis gets used to make people afraid so that they willingly hand over more control to the government that promises solutions and never delivers. Patterns are the universe's language. They're everywhere, telling you what works, what doesn't, and what's coming next. Patterns are like the cheat codes of reality. If you can read them, you can predict outcomes. If you can predict, you can prepare. And if you can prepare, you can act with confidence instead of panic. These political and social patterns keep us stuck in crisis mode, forever too overwhelmed to think long-term or notice that the game is rigged. But once you start recognizing the patterns, you cut through that fog of reaction and you start to see the systems for what they really are. You see the same stories being played out over and over and over in history, and the same players in different suits. And now it's less like, oh my God, I can't believe that they're going to do XYZ. And it's more like, okay, yeah, I've seen this movie before. You can more accurately predict what's going to come next based on what happened last time. You can sidestep the traps instead of falling into them again and again and start playing the long game for yourself in your life. All right, so now, based on all these patterns we observe in human behavior, in society, in the state, in industry, in culture, and throughout history, now we can start to pinpoint, where is the world actually heading? Now look, you're probably not going to like this. In fact, it might piss some of you off. It might scare the living shit out of you. But ride it out with me. Because if you can sit through the scary part, there's a real light at the end of this tunnel, I promise. So buckle up. The truth is, the world is moving towards more centralization and more control. Every single crisis, whether it's real, exaggerated, or just straight up manufactured, is used to centralize more power. Every single goddamn time. 9/11, we got the surveillance state, the Patriot Act, and more endless wars. The 2008 crash, we got bank bailouts, more central consolidation, and economists screaming that these giant financial institutions were too big to fail, just like they said about the Titanic right before it too frickin' sank. COVID, we saw mass compliance drills, mandates, a push for digital IDs, and central bank digital currencies, or CBDCs. This isn't some, partisan talking point. It's an ancient archetypal pattern. Create a crisis, promise safety, demand obedience, and consolidate power. So if this keeps going, where does it lead? Well, we can expect more of the same top-down control under the guise of safety, equity, or climate action, more digital handcuffs, and the further erosion of local governance and individual sovereignty. Now next is the capture of technological innovation. All tech starts out decentralized and open. It offers us new tools that give us more freedom. The internet, for example, right? That started out as just the Wild West of ideas. And now it's completely owned and controlled by 5 corporations. Cryptocurrency was born from a dream of decentralizing money, and now it's been twisted into state-sanctioned ETFs and surveillance coins. AI started off as an open-source playground for builders and free thinkers, and now it's been centralized behind mega servers and corporations that gatekeep information. That's the pattern. New tools always empower people until they get captured, monopolized, and flipped into instruments of surveillance and control. If this pattern continues, we're going to keep seeing more digital dependency and less true ownership. A huge push for AI governance and safe AI, both of which are just code for controlled narratives, black box algorithms, and censorship dressed up as safety. No, I'm not saying this because I think technology is inherently evil. Just like a rifle isn't inherently evil. It's a tool. It's not good or bad. It's neutral until you put it in the hands of someone who's either going to do good or bad shit with it. You can, go shoot a deer to feed your family, or you can go and shoot up a liquor store. It's the same thing for technology. At first, these tools really do empower us. They open new doors, they spark new opportunities, and they let us build outside the system. But if you zoom out and you track the pattern, you see that the moment that centralized power gets its hands on them, the tools get flipped. When the state and these big corporate monopolies co-opt the tech and rebrand it as safe or official, it becomes a Trojan horse for more control. So the tools themselves aren't the enemy. The enemy is capture and centralization. Next, we continuously see consolidation of supply chains and resources. So this goes, first we globalize everything, right? And then we move from local food, local goods, and local relationships to this giant interconnected web of global supply chains. Then we chase efficiency at all costs with, these just-in-time logistics, which means that there's no backup inventory, there's no stockpiles, there's no cushion for when something breaks. Everything's supposed to arrive right at the exact moment that it's needed, like clockwork. And yeah, that looks fantastic on a spreadsheet until it doesn't in reality. Because we've got COVID, wars, shipping snafus. All that stuff exposed just how fragile that this whole global house of cards really is. And what's the proposed solution? It's not local resilience. It's not more neighborhood food co-ops. It's not regional farms or independent energy. Instead, they push more centralized and so-called resilient systems like indoor vertical farms run by a few corporations, lab-grown meat instead of local pasture-raised animals, smart grids that you don't own controlling your energy usage, farmland scooped up by billionaires and investment firms like BlackRock to lock up control of your food at the source. Where does this pattern lead us? To a shift from self-reliance to life as a subscription, where you rent all of your basic needs instead of own them, all at the whim of whoever's got their hands on the centralized switch. It's sold to us as green, efficient, and sustainable, but what it really means is your independence gets labeled as dangerous or unregulated while they continue to consolidate the basics of life into controlled services. I wish this wasn't true, guys. I really do. All right, next. So we also see the manufactured division as a recurring pattern, right? It's the pattern of classic divide and conquer. You keep people pointing fingers and fighting each other over identity and race and gender and politics and ideology and vax status, you name it. The list keeps getting longer. And we never notice who's really running the show when we're all pointing fingers at each other. When folks are busy screaming at each other about pronouns or red versus blue, they aren't building local economies or questioning why the same corporations own their food, their medicine, and the media. It's a distraction strategy as old as empire itself. Keep the peasants fighting in the courtyard while the lords loot the treasury. And we're just going along with it. So we're going to keep seeing more micro-tribes, more echo chambers, more emphasis on outrage to keep people banging their fists against the castle walls instead of using that energy to create our own solutions. Every new crisis or hot topic will keep being used to deepen these fractures so we keep fighting our neighbors and never unite around real sovereignty or economic independence. Now, we've got the pattern of financial enslavement. They print more money, everything inflates, people go into debt buying what they need or want, and they lure us into handing over yet more power with sweet-sounding promises of quote-unquote security. Inflation sucks value out of every dollar that you save with every new dollar that they print. Student loans are designed to keep young people obedient, risk-averse, and terrified to step off the hamster wheel. Housing prices are so absurdly high that entire generations are forced into permanent renting and are living always at the mercy of landlords and banks. Now, where does this lead us? Again, to shift from ownership to lifelong subscription. And it's the ultimate wet dream for centralized power. You own nothing, you rent everything, and they dangle access in front of you like a carrot, and you'll do whatever it takes to get what you need. Now, finally, we see psychological warfare and manipulation through fear. The pattern here is they trap you in a constant loop of fear and dopamine hits, so you stay terrified, distracted, and easy to control. The media bombards you with nonstop crisis, always war, disease, economic collapse, and your nervous system just stays locked in survival mode. You're freaking out inside all the time. We weren't wired biologically to have access to constant stress all the time. Social media trains us to chase rage bait, argue with strangers, and numb ourselves instead of prepare and build. They don't need to spend any extra resources trying to physically control people if they can get us to police ourselves by training us what to think, how to react, and to behave a certain way. And as a result, we've got ourselves a society that's too freaked out to plan ahead, too addicted to emotional reactions to think critically, and too fractured to work together, and perfectly engineered to beg for a leash, to trade freedom for safety, and never realize we're in a mental prison. Now, how the hell did I come to this conclusion? Well, you come to it too. All you got to do, man, is go look back at history, and you will see these same exact patterns repeating over and over for centuries. Here's what I mean. Rome, for example, started out as small agrarian tribes. They then centralized, they overreached, and collapsed. Chinese dynasties and medieval European monarchies followed the same script. Now, so is the United States. The pattern is always the same. Consolidate, extract, overreach, collapse, decentralize, repeat. Medieval Europe faced waves of plagues that the church and the monarchy used to tighten control under some, divine mandate. In ancient Egypt, famines and Nile floods gave pharaohs total religious and total political authority. The Roman Empire, economic crisis, and barbarian threats justified emergency powers and military rule. Now, so do modern states everywhere. Same pattern today. Create a crisis, promise safety, demand obedience, lock in power, repeat. In Mesopotamia, they controlled the irrigation canals, controlled the grain, and controlled the people. In feudal Europe, lords owned the land, and the peasants depended on them for survival. In industrial Britain, the Enclosure Acts pushed people off of common land and into factory dependence. And now, it's happening again through mortgages, corporate farmland, and food monopolies. We still see the same pattern today. Remove self-sufficiency, create dependency, extract obedience, repeat. In the early days of the printing press, ideas spread like wildfire. Then came church censorship and book burnings. With the telegraph and the telephone, communication went global. Then monopolies like Bell seized control. Today we see this with every new tech that comes out. And the pattern is always the same. Empower, centralize, capture, weaponize, repeat. In ancient Rome, they kept the masses docile with free grain and gladiators. In France, bread shortages and spectacles distracted people from royal corruption. Today, we've got social media and all the stuff we went over earlier. The pattern is always distract, divide, pacify, extract, repeat. Need I go on? No, so if we follow these patterns along with the current trajectory of society, where are these centralized powers leading the world? Well, I'm going to need a sip of water first before I answer that question. Because frankly, we are rocketing towards a future that would make Orwell's 1984 look like a goddamn children's book, guys. We are talking technocratic, top-down control where every decision is made by unelected experts, black box algorithms, and AI systems that nobody voted for and nobody can question. Picture it for a second, right? This dystopian future. A branded AI policed gulag. Bug burgers on the menu. Netflix drip fed straight into your nervous system and a carbon credit leash cinched around your neck. We're talking central bank digital currencies and programmable credits that track every transaction, every calorie, every mile you move. Privacy? Gone. Autonomy? An illusion. One wrong word, one unapproved opinion, and your wallet is frozen with a single keystroke. Subscription-based everything. You rent your smart city apartment, your car, your heat, your dinner. You'll never own anything because ownership is dubbed dangerous, inefficient, and unfair. Your access depends entirely on your social score and your compliance. Surveillance will be so invasive that it'll crawl under your skin. You'll walk outside to robot police dogs scanning your face and checking your QR code. Drones hum overhead, counting your breaths, tallying your carbon footprint. AI judges in automated courtrooms handing down sentences by algorithm. No humanity, no mercy, no appeal. Meanwhile, you're cut off from real land, real food, and real human connection. Your life is reduced to sterilized virtual experiences and lab-grown illusions of belonging. And they'll brand this all as progress. You'll pass LED billboards screaming equity, sustainability, trust the science. They'll tell you it's green, it's safe, and it's inclusive. And you'll own nothing and be happy. Until you realize you're not living. You're being farmed. So how's that for a shit sandwich dipped in a stew of fucked? Yeah, it's not a conspiracy theory, guys. It's a pattern. And it's the direction we're being herded in. You think you're gonna, you think that we're gonna vote our way out of that? Yeah. Good luck to you, buddy. And I'm not trying to be an asshole. And I'm not trying to just freak you guys out here. I actually do think that there's a way out of this nightmare. I don't think this is guaranteed by any means. But we're sure as hell not going to get any real change out of the people at the top who benefit from everything staying the same and who benefit from the further consolidation of power. And I think that waiting for that is a fool's errand. I think voting only gives the state more power and puts us on an even faster track towards this outcome. And I think trying to use force to overthrow everything in some revolution just gives them an excuse to drag us there, kicking and screaming. So what the hell do we do then? Well, strap in, because here comes the light at the end of this deep, dark rabbit hole that I promised earlier. Because nature, man, she's got this funny little habit of just absolutely laying waste to our illusions of human control. Every single time in history, every empire, every regime, every power structure that centralized and overreach, it always collapsed. Not sometimes, not maybe, always. It might have looked totally unshakable in the moment. It might have felt like the oppression and the tyranny would last forever. But no matter how strong the walls, no matter how tight the control, no matter how brutal and ruthless the tactics were, it never stuck. Why is that? Because it violates nature's core pattern. Nature is built on balance and resilience. She doesn't do monocultures. She doesn't do single points of failure. Nature is decentralized. In every healthy ecosystem, there's diversity, there's redundancy, and there's feedback loops. When one branch breaks, another one takes its place. When one organism dies, it feeds the soil for the next. Now, centralization, that's a brittle system. It stacks everything on one single spine. One supply chain, one central bank, one true ideology, one monoculture of thought. Sure, it looks efficient on paper, but it's fragile in practice. And man, nature just loves to test systems. She pushes them with storms, pests, droughts, and shock. If your system can't flex and adapt, it snaps. If it can't self-correct, it gets composted. Every overreaching empire thinks it's the exception, that it's finally built the perfect cage to control life itself. But life laughs at cages. Rome thought it was immortal. It got rotted from the inside and overrun. Egypt, pharaohs thought they were gods. Literally, when the Nile stopped flooding, nature reminded them that they were just men. China, dynasties rose and fell like tides, each new cycle born from the ashes of the last. Medieval Europe, they thought feudal control was eternal. Then the Black Death, peasant revolts, and new trade routes shattered it. Same thing with the modern technocratic empires today. No matter how shiny the surveillance cameras or how powerful their algorithms, nature will find the cracks. Because no centralized system can outlast the living, breathing, adaptive force of life itself. You can see this already. Supply chains cracking, social trust evaporating, underground networks sprouting everywhere, local food systems rising, people yearning for real, physical, rooted life again. When a system goes too far beyond resilience, it collapses under its own weight. When control tries to strangle diversity, diversity fights back in unexpected and unstoppable ways. When power tries to centralize, it breeds the seeds of its own destruction. That's the ultimate pattern. And I don't know about you, but for me, that's the best goddamn news I'll ever hear. Because it means no matter how dark it gets, no matter how tight the squeeze feels, no matter how complete the grid might seem, it can't last. It never does, and it never will. Nature doesn't negotiate. She doesn't bend the knee. She resets. That's your light. That's your proof. That's your invitation to stand in that current instead of getting swept away by it. Now, if we step back even further, we see another pattern. A human pattern. Because while nature is busy composting every empire that overreaches, there's something else happening right alongside it. People inching, clawing their way to freedom. From the dawn of civilization, humans have wrestled with control and liberation like two wolves in a cage. The first empires were built on pure slavery and absolute power. In Mesopotamia, grain was currency, irrigation was control, and you worked the land for your lords or you starved to death. In Egypt, pharaohs owned the land, the people, and they even claimed ownership of the afterlife. In Rome, slavery was so common it was considered just how the world works. But with every collapse, something cracked open. When the Roman Empire fell, feudalism rose. Still tyrannical, but power decentralized into fiefdoms. We got lords instead of emperors. A more spacious cage, but a cage nonetheless. Then came the slow, bloody emergence of the idea that power could be shared. We got the Magna Carta, the peasant revolts, early parliaments. People started whispering, maybe kings weren't gods after all. Maybe humans had rights beyond what the crown allowed. Fast forward, the Enlightenment. Philosophers began to argue that humans were born free. That sovereignty wasn't handed down by a monarch, but inherited in every living soul. Next, the experiment of democracy. Flawed as hell, manipulated, corrupted, but it cracked the door open. And suddenly, power wasn't absolute and inherited, it had to be negotiated, at least in theory. Then abolition movements rose. People said, wait, nobody should own another human being. Period. The cage cracked again. We got women's suffrage, civil rights, decade after decade, movement after movement, each one a push to widen the circle of freedom. Not perfectly, not cleanly, not without massive resistance and blood, but each step moved us closer to recognizing that real sovereignty lives at the level of the individual, not the throne, not the state, and not the collective mob. And each time that knowledge spread, centralized control took a beating. The printing press shattered the church's monopoly on truth. Telegraphs and telephones started breaking the grip of local kings and aristocrats. The internet blew the gates off the global knowledge vault, just for a moment, before the capture started again. Every time a new technology allowed ideas to spread freely, those in power scrambled to cage it. And every time, it got out before they could fully lock it down. And let's not forget the quiet revolutions happening under the radar. The rise of permaculture and regenerative agriculture, the homesteading boom, the open source software movement, the Bitcoin revolution, decentralized mesh networks, local trade circles, peer-to-peer, everything. These aren't just fads. They're the living proof that people yearn to break the chains of dependency. Proof that under all the noise, the real human spirit keeps crawling towards self-governance. We've gone from subjects to citizens, from owned to free, from silent to outspoken. And now, in this 21st century, there's a new chance on the table to move beyond just asking for permission to rule ourselves, and to just fucking do it. That's the ultimate trajectory of all of these historical arcs, guys. From empire to feudalism to monarchies to flawed democracies to decentralized communities to full personal sovereignty. From total domination to voluntary association. From forced obedience to chosen interdependence. The deeper pattern is clear. Nature composts empire, and humans, bit by bit, compost tyranny. You can see it in every generation's push. The abolition of slavery, votes for women, civil rights, The fall of colonial empires, decentralized movements and local uprisings, hackers, homesteaders, seed savers, privacy advocates, all making new cracks. It's messy. It's slow. It's often tragic. But it is undeniably moving. And now, we're on the edge of a new chapter. If we understand these patterns, nature's corrections and humanity's crawl towards sovereignty, we can envision a different future on the horizon. A future not built on monoculture control grids and digital leashes, but on local abundance, real relationships, and voluntary networks. A future where you don't have to ask to be free. You just are. Because you and your community built it that way. By design. Not by permission slip. That's the vision, guys. That's the trajectory. And that's the offer on the table. If we're brave enough to reach out and take it. All right. Yeah, I just kind of am unloading the whole arsenal that I had for the next couple weeks on you guys, because this is the last one for a minute. So hopefully you're okay and you're still with me. We're almost to the part where I'm going to explain why this is the final dispatch. But first things first, bear with me. I want to hit you guys with 2 more quick things, just to keep in tradition of the previous 6 dispatches. We just walked through centuries of collapse, rebirth, and the raw, unvarnished truth of what it means to reclaim your life. And at the end of the day, all that big picture strategy starts right here, right in your backyard, right in your kitchen, right in your hands, turning raw, fiery ingredients into something that can't be bought off a shelf. So our recipe this week is one that takes work, patience, and more work. Just like this change that we're talking about today. This recipe is at the top of my list of my all-time favorites. I'm going to share with you guys my recipe for my 6-week fermented sriracha sauce, all right? And I am not kidding, guys. Please try this. It's so goddamn good. You'll forget Frank's Red Hot and whatever else. Trust me. This is going to blow the Frank's Red Hot out of your fucking brain, okay? Please try this. So, you're going to need about half a pound of serrano peppers, jalapenos, half a pound of serrano peppers, half a pound of jalapenos, and 1 to 3 habaneros, depending on how much you like that kick. 8 to 10 garlic cloves, some sea salt, a tablespoon of honey, water, and a half cup of white or rice vinegar. First up, you're going to chop all your peppers. You're going to weigh them out. And like every other fermentation recipe, if you're lacto-fermenting, you're going to add 2% of the total weight of all of your ingredients in salt, minus the water. Don't weigh the water and add 2% of that. Just the vegetables, right? You're going to mix that salt into your water, and then so it dissolves and spreads everywhere. Then you're going to dump your water into your jar with your peppers. Make sure everything's fully submerged. Label it with the date and let it sit somewhere dark and cool for 6 whole weeks. Make sure you go and you check and you burp the jar every couple days if you're not using a fermentation lid. Because I'll tell you what, the jars can explode. There are gases that form during the fermentation process. I've never had it happen to me personally, but I'll tell you what, I have let it go for a couple more days than I should have. And when I pop that lid, it's just a gushing, bubbly explosion all over my counter. And it's really amusing, but it's never fun to clean up after. So just check it every couple days. Okay, so yeah, burp your jar. Definitely label it so you don't forget when your 6 weeks are up. And then when the time is right, you're going to throw that whole mix, the brine, the peppers, everything, except your fermentation weight, don't do this, into a blender with your honey and your vinegar and strain out the seeds once it's all blended up. Then you're going to throw that in a little saucepan. You're going to let it simmer on low for like 5, 10, 15 minutes. Wait until you smell that aroma change a little bit, and you'll know, trust me, you'll know when it's ready. What you got now is a fiery, living sauce that carries your fingerprints, your patience, and your goddamn defiance in every drop. Jar it up, store it in the fridge, drizzle it on your eggs, swirl it into soups, smear it on your meat, not that meat, and every time, remember, change starts small. Change starts spicy. And it starts with your own 2 hands. All right, now I am going to break tradition here a little bit. Instead of going into our usual book of the month, for this final dispatch, I'm going to give you guys something different. Another podcast. I want to point you towards one of my greatest teachers. And someone who's been doing this almost 20 years longer than I have. I've been listening to Jack Spirko and the Survival Podcast for about 3 years now. I found him right around the time where I was really getting serious about homesteading. I was in a rough spot at the time. It was just a rocky, tumultuous point in my life. And I was just looking everywhere for teachers and for tools that could help me get out of that spot and build independence and feel strong. Now, I found Jack, and he's not just a guy with a microphone. He had a way of articulating what I was thinking that I just didn't have words for at the time. And I thought of him as like a mentor, even though he's got no idea who I am. He's a straight shooter who's been hammering these principles into the world for almost 20 years. He's taught me and countless others that real freedom comes from the choices you make every day. What you grow, what you build, what you learn, and how you stand up for yourself and your family. Now, if you've been digging what I've shared here in these dispatches, I can promise you'll find an absolute gold mine in Jack's archives. So, if you want to keep sharpening your mindset, keep building, and keep stacking skills while I step back to pivot and prepare for what's next in my life, go check out the Survival Podcast with Jack Spirko. You might not agree with him on every single thing, but he is absolutely one of us. And you'll walk away thinking deeper, acting sharper, and moving closer to real sovereignty. All right. So here's the deal, guys. The Dispatch was never meant to be a podcast. And if you've been with me since the beginning, you know that. It started as a weekly email newsletter. I created it to build trust, to share tactics and philosophy with you guys deeper than what I was posting on Instagram at the time, while I worked behind the scenes trying to figure out how to build a website, figuring out what my mission was, what I was going to do, and, build out the bones of this whole thing, figure out what the podcast was in the first place. And, after a couple weeks of pouring myself into these newsletters, I had this kind of moment where I thought, man, who the hell has time to actually sit down and read these giant essays every week? They were long and complex, but they were also packed with value. The kind of value that I wish I had found when I first started this journey, and that's why I made it. So I decided to try something different and record them as audio. I started reading them out loud, literally just sitting in my car with my phone. The first couple, rough. But each week, they got longer. They got sharper. And they got better. At least I think so. You might disagree. And I had this moment where I just realized, dude, you just accidentally created a podcast. So I hit full send and I launched Sustainable Sedition Radio with a weekly episode called The Dispatch. And man, I have poured every piece of myself into these things. I'm not exaggerating. I have been spending at least 20 plus hours a week on each one. I'm not even kidding. I've been writing them like I'm crafting the goddamn Declaration of Independence every single week. And it has been taking so much of my mental bandwidth and the time and my time that I've just had to face the hard reality about the situation. That it's not sustainable. And if there's one thing that this whole project is supposed to stand for, it's sustainable lifestyles. It's sustainability of systems, of families, and of freedom. And man, as much as it pains me to say it, the Dispatch, as I've been doing it, is not a sustainable system for me. I'm watching my relationship strain. I'm missing moments with my kids that I'll never get back. And I'm neglecting the work on the property that actually makes this lifestyle that I talk about real for me and my family. Today we talked a lot about systems thinking. When systems fail, you don't cling to it. You identify the weak link and you redesign. Right now, this dispatch format is the weak link. So I'm killing it. But this isn't the end of Sustainable Sedition. It's a pivot. The Dispatch was the foundation. It helped me sharpen my voice, helped me build trust, and helped me find you guys, the tribe. But it's not the final form. We got a baby coming. Any day now. Like literally any day. My lady needs me. My kids need me. And I need to show up for them as the man that I say that I want to be. So I'm putting down the hammer for a minute. Not the mission. Think of this as the end of season 1. A conclusion to a chapter. And the end of the beginning. And a reboot for Sustainable Sedition Radio. So, what's next? Well, you can learn a lot from content. But if you really want to learn, you have to get out there and fucking do it. Trial and error will teach you more than any podcast or any book ever could. So, I want to challenge you to make your actions be what comes next. And in the meantime, I'm still here. I'll be dropping micro episodes over the next, I don't know how long. Raw updates on everything that I'm learning and that I'm doing while I navigate this season of my life and fully am present with my family while we go through this chapter, have this new baby, and acclimate to this new situation that we're in. I'm not dipping out on you guys. I'm going to be here. And these next few months are going to be me walking you through what I'm going through while I go deeper into this life that I've been talking about this whole time and really living it fully. I'm going to be showing you what it actually looks like living it for me in real time. I don't know exactly what it's going to look like yet. I'm going to be totally honest with you. I can't make any promises that we're going to actually have an episode every single week. I'm going to try my best. But if you've had kids, you know. And if you don't have kids, then that's okay. You'll just have to, you'll see. You'll see one day. But yeah, I don't know what it's going to look like yet. I'm still figuring all that out myself. But I do know this. It ain't over. It's just the beginning. And we're going to keep this thing moving forward together. And that, my friends, is a wrap on our final dispatch. Whew. Now, if you felt something today, if it hit home and it lit a fire under your ass, the biggest thing that you can do for me right now is share it. And no, not just a quick blast on your story that disappears in 24 hours. I'm talking person to person. Text it to a friend, a family member, someone who's just starting to wake up. Because real movements, they spread through real relationships. If you haven't subscribed yet, just search for Sustainable Sedition Radio on Spotify, Fountain, YouTube, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're there, drop me a rating or a written review. Yeah, I know, it's a pain in the ass, but it helps us beat the algorithm overlords and gets the signal in front of more people like you who actually benefit. If you want to go deeper, join the email list. That's where I'll be sending raw updates, early access to future episodes, and info on the founding member program when it launches. You can also check out the resources page on the site. I've put together a list of books, documentaries, and experts to help you stack skills and build resilience in your own life. All those links are going to be right in the show notes. This is it, guys. This is how we keep the signal alive in a collapsing empire. You share it, you rate it, you stay connected, and together we keep on building what thrives and changing